Rika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. You just laid out the tough economic times that Canadians are facing. You say you're seized with the issue. Did you consider that backdrop when you decided to take an $80,000 free vacation?
As many Canadians did, I stayed with friends over the holidays.
Many Canadians don't have access to a $90,000 free vacation. So can you just explain a bit more the thinking as to why you take these vacations and how you think Canadians receive them?
Like many Canadians did, I stayed with family friends over the holidays.
Years of this NDP Liberal government, it's clear the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. He gave us 3 different versions of his Jamaican vacation. First, he claimed he was paying all the expenses for his family's stay. Secondly, he claimed he was staying at no cost at a location owned by a family friend. And then he claimed that he and his family stayed with friends. Now, all 3 different versions cannot be accurate at the same time. Which version did he tell the Ethics Commissioner?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and his family took a Christmas vacation. Before the trip, the Office of the Ethics Commissioner was consulted on the details to ensure the rules were followed. The Prime Minister and his family then proceeded with the trip, and all the rules were followed.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. Do you ever get a free vacation? It would seem like our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is taking free vacations, lying about it, being dishonest, misleading, distracting, dividing, all of his tricks. Larry Brock calls him out in committee, calls him out there as well on the House of Commons floor in question period. But it's interesting to see the way that the Liberal backbenchers, IQRA, KHALID, Pam, DAMOFF, the points of order they put up. Mike Barrett's in this one too. This is a smorgasbord of MPs that do go at it in committee. Let's take a look. Larry Brock calls Trudeau what he really is. Let's take a look.
The motion has been moved. I've got Mr. Brock followed by Ms. Khalid and then Ms. Damoff after that. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to start at the outset by wishing all my colleagues a Happy New Year. I hope that everyone had an enjoyable, relaxing time away from the Hill. A few of us, unfortunately, are back earlier than we anticipated, but this is an important issue not only for parliamentarians, but it's an important issue for Canadians. As my colleague, Mr. Barrett, has indicated, 2024 has not started off on a new footing. It's essentially the same sort of issues that Canadians are dealing with in 2023 and 2022, and that's the issue of affordability. I know personally many members of my constituency who wrote to me and expressed their astonishment that how tone deaf this Prime Minister and this Liberal government was in light of all of the issues that Canadians are facing, that he would find it appropriate to accept an $84,000 gift for an extremely extravagant holiday in Jamaica. I think we are all of the same belief, and I believe all Canadians are of the same belief, Mr. Chair, that the Prime Minister is indeed worthy of a vacation. He is indeed worthy of spending quality time with his family. He was born of privilege. He maintains a lifestyle of privilege. It's now no shock to anyone here at this committee or in this House or across Canada that he is well connected with terms of friends and other associates around the world, and he probably enjoys staying at locations that offer some of the finer things in life. We don't begrudge that as a starting point. What we do begrudge is how a particular issue such as this has blown up to such an extent that it now has the makings of a scandal. This was a really non-issue from the get-go. If the Prime Minister and his office were completely transparent as to who sourced this particular vacation, how it was communicated to the Prime Minister, all the terms associated with he accepting the offer to stay at this luxurious villa, had he been upfront with Parliament, had he been upfront with Canadians right from the outset, I don't think we'd be here today. But the Prime Minister and his office have compounded this particular issue as such that we as parliamentarians are here asking for clarification. And you know, Mr. Chair, this isn't a one-off. This is a pattern of conduct with this Prime Minister and his office to mislead Canadians. Setting aside the controversy surrounding his trip to the Aga Khan Island and how he was found guilty of breaching the ethic guidelines, he promised Canadians in the House that he would do better, that he would communicate in advance with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and be upfront. Because the hallmark of the Trudeau brand, the hallmark of the Trudeau government is transparency. That's what he promised Canadians during the 2015 general election. You vote for me, you will have the most open, transparent, and accountable government this country has ever seen. Has that happened, Mr. Chair? Absolutely not. I really don't know if anyone on the Liberal bench, and certainly the Prime Minister, even understand the definition of transparency. But most recently, the government has shuffled some positions. One of the shuffling of positions was the House Leader, the government House Leader, who is now occupying that position by the name of Steve McKinnon. Steve McKinnon was asked by the press with respect to this vacation. He indicated as follows. The Prime Minister, and this is a quote, the Prime Minister followed all the rules and in fact got his travel plans pre-approved by the Commissioner. We know that's a lie. It's misleading. It was deliberate. It was intentional on Mr. McKinnon's part to mislead Canadians. Because now we know that that office, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, does not pre-approve and give permission to vacation. The issue is whether or not the form of a gift qualifies as an acceptable one under the Act. To clarify, he says, the office, no, I'm sorry, that's the quote from the Ethics Commissioner. But he went on in a different interview, this is Steve McKinnon, the government House Leader, and it said as follows. I think Canadians don't want to deny the Prime Minister the ability to take a Christmas vacation with his family, and that's what he did. McKinnon told reporters last week, all of the rules have been followed, and the law has, as one of its fundamental pillars, transparency, which is, of course, the reason why we're discussing this today. The Prime Minister has acted transparently. Are we to accept the House Leader's word for that? I think that would be negligent. I don't think we'd be doing our job as His Majesty's loyal opposition to accept that at face value in light of the fact that the office has since rebutted the position taken by the Prime Minister and his office that this was pre-approved. There's a lot of smoke here, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure there is a fire that's burning, Mr. Chair, that we need to find out its source. As I indicated, this is not a one-off. It is a series of missteps by this government. I talked about the Aga Khan vacation. We then had the dress-up clown show in India. We then had the issue surrounding the very first Truth and Reconciliation Day. Again, one of the hallmarks of the Trudeau brand and our Prime Minister in the 2015 election was his pronouncement that there was no other relationship that was more important to Canada than its relationship with Indigenous Canadians. He created the very first Truth and Reconciliation Day after the discovery of the unmarked graves in Kamloops. This was an important milestone in the history of this country in an effort to broker reconciliation between non-Indigenous and Indigenous alike. What did the Prime Minister do? The Prime Minister instructed his office to lie to Canadians to say that he was in Canada engaging in private meetings when in fact, some sleuths in the Canadian public were able to track his flight and realize he wasn't in Ottawa. He was en route to BC to take a surfing vacation.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, on your point of order. And as it relates to the standing orders, I'd like to just some clarification on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, twice now the member has said that the Prime Minister lied, and I think we all know that that is not allowed under parliamentary rules. So I just wondered if you could remind him that he can't say that the Prime Minister lied. If that could just, you could remind the honourable member of that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damoff. I'm going to ask Mr. Brock just to be a little more judicious in his words. Thank you.
The Prime Minister was deceitful to Canadians, Mr. Chair. So instead of telling the truth that he in fact was in Ottawa, engaged in private meetings, he furthered his own selfish private interests in taking a surfing vacation on the very first day that he created. It was embarrassing, and it was shameful, and it was an event that should not have happened. So again, these are things that I wanted to bring to the attention of this committee, that this Jamaican Christmas vacation is not a one-off. It displays a pattern of miscommunication and deceit by the Prime Minister's office, giving 3 different versions of the truth as to what they communicated to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. And we as parliamentarians, but more importantly Canadians from coast to coast to coast, need some daylight shed on this issue. And for all of those reasons, I support my colleague's motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock. On the motion, I do have a list. I have Ms. Khalid, followed by Ms. Damoff, suivi par Monsieur Gourde, et Madame Fortier après Monsieur Gourde. Ms. Khalid, go ahead, you have the floor. On the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think on the motion, I think it's important for us to understand the context of it. So if it's okay with you and through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Barrett, I know that he had written to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. He had written a letter. I'm just wondering if he had gotten a response and what that response was. And if that's okay, once I get the answer from Mr. Barrett, I'd like to take the floor back.
Mr. Barrett, do you have a response for Ms. Khalid or not?
I'd say that the most relevant point from the commissioner's response was that he's not able to share correspondence, if there was any, between the Prime Minister's office and his office. And so, hearing from the ethics commissioner and then being able to make a decision as a committee on if we were going to have documents produced, the committee deciding if we were going to have a review of the act. These are all things that we can do, but it's not something that the commissioner can do proactively.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chair. I'm quite perplexed, actually. I mean, on the one hand, we give the Conflict of Interest Commissioner the ability, the privilege to look into and to consult with each member of Parliament, each elected official's affairs, to help them and guide them in how we conduct our affairs in the most ethical, the most transparent manner. And so, as Mr. Barrett had written to the Ethics Commissioner on this specific issue, it would be really nice to see, because this matter is now before the committee, what the actual response was. I would love for Mr. Barrett to share with the whole committee what the Ethics Commissioner responded back to him on these questions that we are all deliberating right now on this emergency meeting on this 106.4. So I'm hoping that Mr. Barrett, on his own accord, would be able to share and just forward, whether through the clerk or to all of our committee members, what the exact response was. It really, I think, calls into question how we conduct ourselves as members of parliament and the importance of the transparency with which we operate and the importance of making sure that there is trust in democratic institutions. I mean, you know, like over these past couple of days, I've kind of delved into this this question of whether, you know, like what's the difference between taking a vacation with a family friend, having consulted with the ethics commissioner, letting them know that you are about to do this, and then paying back the flights for it, versus you know, going on a trip with a Hungarian think tank to the United Kingdom and having thousands of dollars worth of fine foods. What is that? Where is that line? I mean, how do we really understand and appreciate what our role is as members of parliament? What is the role of the Conflict of Interest Act? And I think that this is, you know, whether it was you know, important or not to members of the opposition, I think this is an important question for us to really expand and to understand the nature of the study here, and to understand and appreciate that this is not just about one person. This is about an institution. It is about how we conduct ourselves. How do we ensure that that transparency and the obligation to Canadians exists in how we operate as members of parliament, being in a place of privilege where we have the opportunity to make policy, to advocate on certain issues, and what influences those issues. I mean, I just wonder if a Hungarian think tank would like to influence how we operate here in Parliament, and whether a stake would really implicate or influence what the Conservatives would want to advocate for or not. But I think that perhaps this matter really requires a deep understanding as to how the Conflict of Interest Act really operates within our Parliament, and how we can ensure that transparency exists and that we continue to maintain trust in our democratic institutions, in how we conduct ourselves as members of Parliament. And as I continue to opine on this, Mr. Chair, I just want to again say, I know that Mr. Brock had referred to the House Leader and the new House Leader. I just want to wish the former House Leader, Karina Gould, a very blessed maternity leave as she goes on to have a baby, and just really reconcile with her own family as Mr. and Minister McKinnon goes on to take on her role in an acting capacity as she builds her family. Thanks, Chair.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
What do you guys think? Has Trudeau been dishonest many times, especially in this situation about his vacation and whether it was paid for by somebody else, which he didn't declare, told people it was just staying with friends and family when it was a large chunk of cash? This guy's got to go. Larry Brock's one of the favorites. IQRA, KHALID, and Pam Damoff are ridiculous. Mike Barrett is there to help Brock out. Like and subscribe. This is Canadian Looney, learning all about Canadian federal politics. We watch all the committee videos. They're always interesting. So that's it. Come back. We're doing live shows daily. Come and check us out. My name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things. Leave a comment, please. Love the comments. Catch you next video. Thank you for watching this one.